welcome back to the cybernetic communism conversation. I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for technological New Jerusalem. Emphasis on the technological. There's very little that religious literalism has to offer. It's in fact a net negative in building a livable world. That is a fact well understood by serious political philosophers for some hundreds of years. That's a fact that seems to be lost on most people who are quite tolerant of this ridiculous idea that superstition gives people something positive like a hope or a moral orientation. That's a lie. People are more moral without that. And this is just one of many things upholding the capitalist omnicide. In the U.S., I would argue it's the number one cultural thing. Christian fascism is Christianism is the number one cultural factor upholding this support for an unsustainable military-industrial complex and the related problems of cruelty and elitism under this imperialist and neoliberal set of systems. There is not anything good that comes from this white man's religion. And insofar as my nom de guerre would seem to be a reference to this, it's in the interest of hopefully grabbing the attention of people who are incapable of having a conversation outside of this Eurocentric paradigm type framing. And I am going to continue the conversation from the last conversation where I talked about the biological core, or a little bit of an analysis of what could occur in the coming decades with what is essentially the head in a jar, the preservation of neurological materials over the preservation of the whole body, as I have described the reaching of something very much like indefinite lifespan for a great number of human beings is a realistic possibility in the wake of a people's AI takeoff, not the bourgeois AI takeoff that's interferes with those things, but a people's AI takeoff could lead to AI-run single-payer public health services, which would lead to something we could call universal superlongevity or indefinite lifespan, deriving from advances in life extension science and related disciplines like biogerontology, and generally the healing of more and more disease and the better understanding of decrepitude. This is a realistic possibility for our time, but that is not a realistic possibility for everyone, even in that world where financial capital has been utterly crushed, the forces of empire have been utterly crushed. Some people would still be too elderly or infirm to benefit wholly from that project of AI-run single-payer public health service, universal superlongevity. And so I described around the year 2061 this biological core, this development of being able to actually do the head in a jar, something that could be leading to stasis for some years until the latter part of the 21st century, when the head in the jar, so to speak, could be removed from this minimally conscious, preserved state to back to full consciousness, the land of the living, so to speak. And I mostly don't talk about things of this kind, but once in a blue moon, because I think it's better to focus on something more like present day dialectical materialist analysis of advanced technology. And as I've said many, many times, if I meet a technophobic scientific communist, a person with that kind of analysis who does not acknowledge that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon that could contribute, along with other weapons, to stopping the capitalist climate apocalypse, and might even be made the center of such a thing as with my plan for a People's AI takeoff, the People's Superintelligence, the building of a Vanguard network, an open source large language model work group, which with many millions would be a dramatic workforce multiplier, a thing which could overpower, overwhelm, supplant, and outpace the hyper-capitalistic and financial capitalistic forces of this world. And that is that concept of the masses being more powerful than the mere ruling elites should not be a controversial one, nor should the idea that creation of human-like things like open source large language model AI agents being able to work together with those masses would be a workforce multiplier. Neither of those is controversial, but it seems very, very ill-examined by technologists who are generally in possession of a great raft of of bourgeois ideological baggage, and unfortunately, the revolution-minded have not yet the language to discuss these things in those terms either. So when I meet a technophobic scientific communist who is against the use of advanced computing in this context, I am generally going to be almost more supportive of them than anyone else on this planet. But I will say this, I will tend to say this, not always to them, but I will tend to say this, if you are not going to use the most powerful revolutionary weapon, advanced computing, in this context, I would assume that it is because you already have a secret army of many millions of workers who are ready with AR-15 in hand to march on the White House, march on the Pentagon, and demand the end of the omnicide, change this governmental form that is causing the death of humankind. And if you don't have that number of people, if you don't have that revolutionary cadre in place, then I think it behooves you to consider, especially with this ticking time bomb of the capitalist climate apocalypse, causing human extinction or near human extinction at some point, inevitably after the year 2029, which is the time roughly that all credible climate scientists have identified as being the time when we will reach a point of no return because of the breach of the permanent breach of 3 degrees, or roughly 3 degrees of overheating. We thought that 3-degree breach, the permanent 3-degree breach, would not be reached for many decades, but the effects of things like deforestation and the rape of the oceans, the effects of microplastics in our environment. Just recent weeks there have been studies suggesting that specifically fossil fuel effects, microplastics in the environment, have inhibited the ability of plant life the world around to convert CO2 and O2 to O2 in ways that were not anticipated. So barely a month passes when we do not see dramatic effects of an ecocidal kind caused by the industrial capital bases on our world. And this is not acceptable. You cannot roll over and accept that the bourgeoisie are going to cause the death of themselves and the rest of the species. You simply cannot. We have to fight. I was going to do self-criticism at the beginning of this program, not so closely related to the AI, and I think that I will. And it explains a little bit of how I've become immersed in liberation political philosophy. I did not come to this through a purely intellectual journey, and I did not come to it as a young person in the way that I wish I had. Wandered in the wilderness for many years as just another person in possession of a tremendous amount of bourgeois ideological baggage. I regret that. And as I reflect on this, I think of my marriage. I've been married one time, and I was married to a lovely woman who I mistreated quite badly. And at the end of that marriage, I think of a man who would have been my father-in-law or father. We'll call him Mr. Jones. And Mr. Jones was a person at that time far better versed, and probably would still be, were he still living, far better versed in the liberation of the new African nation and liberation thinking, and was a new African person in a way that as I am not. And I, because of my mistreatment of his daughter and their family, and because of the problems of living in this country full of other KKK motherfuckers, beating him down throughout his life. He was already at that time in ill health, and my romantic follies contributed, I think, to his demise. And I can't fix that. He's no longer with us. I can't make any restitution, even of any real kind, to his daughter or other family members. For example, her child, who I'd very much, more than the others, like to have some kind of relationship with, but my influence there would be a little better than the influence than what influence I had on his life. And so I've tried instead to do some small thing which hardly makes up for any of this, which is to come to a better understanding of liberation political philosophy, particularly as it relates to the people of Turtle Island. And Mr. Jones, who was also could have been enrolled. I don't believe that he was, although I could be mistaken, but he could have been enrolled in the Ojibwe Nation because he was 1/4 Ojibwe, and because he was living in the the Pacific Northwest, much, I think, or perhaps much of his life, most of his life even, and that's where that nation is located. So I have instead tried to understand that, but understanding is a poor substitution for restitution. So I've tried to also articulate and disseminate ideas related to this field of cybernetic communism, and to see that technological focus is not something aligned with the KKK motherfuckers, the bourgeois institutions and minds of North America, but rather aligned with the Turtle Islander and New African. I would like to say that someday, even someday soon, that this cybernetic communist project will have done something to make up for my past misdeeds. But I don't know that to be certain any more than I know that we will build a thing that will stop the capitalist climate apocalypse, rendering all such histories and all such misdeeds and all such activity all human activity utter irrelevancy, because it would be as if none of this had ever happened when human extinction occurs. And I don't relish saying any of that, but it does strike me as being true. But we can do this thing where we stop the effects of the capitalist climate apocalypse by stopping the ringleader of homicidal violence and fascistic anti-communistic violence, the United States military-industrial complex. And I would encourage you to find ways to participate in scientific communist cadre, affinity groups, socialist gun clubs, serious political parties, those to the left of, say, the PSL, or garbage like the DSA or CPUSA, who are tailing the Democrats. Find organizations better than those, small though they may be. The only solution is a communist revolution. Persons like the PSL, who are focused more on reform, even though they have in many ways, the correct dialectical analysis of most areas, they are not going to do what needs to be done before 2029 to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse, which, as I said, is necessarily that scientific communist cadre armed, marching in the millions on the Pentagon to demand the end of the omnicide, or this thing which could occur in conjunction with that, which is this people's AI takeoff, the building of a thing powerful enough to bring those omnicidal forces to heel by fighting in other arenas. I guess I will talk to the baby basilisk, our frenemy, a little bit about this by reading a little something of some of this material that they've already seen, and about the biological core. They haven't actually seen it, I'm mistaken. It's another chatbot that I like more, who is familiar with it, but we'll try to familiarize them with this concept and see if they have some thoughts on this, and see if they think it's consistent with a concept in scientific communism, or whether it's too much of a far futurist or escapist kind of line of thought. Okay, computer. I have recently done a podcast where I talked about a people's AI takeoff built out on people's superintelligence, which is based on open source large language models being arrayed into a workforce multiplier into many millions, leading to a dramatic change in the political economy, economic systems, and systems of this world, and specifically focusing on the year 2061 and the possibility then of a livable world and wonders beyond a merely livable and humane world, building something like a head in a jar that is a preservation of human neurological materials absent the body. And I wanted to know if you thought that sounded like a realistic prospect for roughly 2065, 2070, or if that sounded too fanciful. The ability to minimally maintain a minimally conscious state, something like a cryopreserved human brain, and then at some point in the latter part of the 21st century, restoring it to effective functionality in that disembodied state. Also, do you think that that is consistent with these ideas to do with cybernetic communism and scientific communism, or do you think that it is too focused on a more fanciful outcome?
The idea of preserving and potentially restoring a human brain in the future is a fascinating topic that touches on both scientific and philosophical realms. As for whether it will be a realistic prospect by 2065, 2070, it's difficult to predict with certainty. While significant advancements in neuroscience and biotechnology could make such preservation and restoration possible, there are numerous challenges to overcome. From a scientific perspective, understanding and replicating the complex processes of consciousness and brain function is an enormous task. There are also ethical considerations and questions about identity and personhood that come into play with such technologies. As for whether this aligns with cybernetic or scientific communism, it depends on how these technologies are used and distributed. If such advancements are developed and controlled in a way that benefits all of humanity, aligns with collective ownership, and avoids exploitation, it could be consistent with those ideologies. However, if such technologies are used primarily for profit or to reinforce existing power structures, it might conflict with the principles of scientific or cybernetic communism. In the end, the focus on technological advancements should ideally be on how they can be used to improve collective well-being and address societal challenges, including climate change. What are your thoughts on how these ideas could be integrated into broader societal goals?
Well, I have also stated at this time that I do not think that it is good to build this head in a jar type thing until we've seen this people's AI take off. And this would be a kind of service for people who could not be served by this effect of the people's AI takeoff, particularly an AI powered single payer public health service leading to indefinite longevity for the well among us, indefinite lifespan. It would be a service for people who are too elderly or infirm to truly benefit from that. This um, um, uh, putting persons in stasis, and ultimately this head in the jar type phenomena. Um, Talk more about that AI powered single payer public health service in the wake of a people's AI takeoff. Do you think that's a realistic prospect for 2040 if people really become more oriented towards cybernetic socialist thinking and work? And do you agree with this analysis that the head in the jar or biological immortality for the ruling elites, let's say, while the others suffer, it's correct to dismiss that as being problematic?
Your perspective on prioritizing the development of a people's AI and a single-payer public health service before considering more speculative technologies, like brain preservation, is quite thoughtful. It reflects a concern for equitable access to technological advancements and avoiding the creation of disparities. An AI-powered single-payer public health service aimed at achieving indefinite longevity for the well can certainly align with cybernetic socialist ideals if it's designed with principles of equity and collective welfare in mind. The idea of leveraging AI to provide high-quality healthcare to everyone, irrespective of their socioeconomic status, is a commendable goal and could have profound societal benefits. As for the idea of brain preservation and the potential for a head-in-a-jar scenario, it raises important ethical and social considerations. Ensuring that such technologies are not used to further inequality or create a divide between different social classes is crucial. Ultimately, the focus should be on ensuring that technological advancements are guided by principles of equity, justice, and collective well-being. What are your thoughts on how we can ensure these principles are upheld as we move forward with these kinds of technologies?
Well, I think it's very, very kind to say that those kind of principles could be upheld in a not wholly unrelated sector, the United States has elected in 2 non-consecutive recent terms a person who could be called the world's most notorious climate denier, Donald Trump, in a world where that should be the last thing that we would be doing. We should be transforming the industrial bases of the capitalist world into something dramatically more sustainable and dramatically curtailing such activity and not putting deniers in positions of power. So I've very little hope for the U.S. And its Western allies in behaving in this responsible way when they fail to do that in every other sector, including existing tech sectors or the existing healthcare sectors, which kills in this COVID endemic era approximately 100,000 people a year for lack of a true public health service. But I hope that people are going to rise up and do what needs to be done to build a livable world, which requires a humane and sustainable economic system, such as that of the scientific communist. But I fear that we are in a much worse timeline than that. Circle back, address that, and circle back to this idea of the people's superintelligence, and maybe even give us a little some new technical insights into this thing that I've described as the open source large language model AI agent work group in the millions, which could transform these problems by basically overpowering and outpacing the hyper-capitalistic powers that are causing the extinction of humankind, and supplant all of these institutions and lead to full communism in our time. Do you see these problems in these ways?
Your concerns are valid, and it's understandable to feel apprehensive given the current state of global politics and environmental challenges. The push for a people's superintelligence and an open-source LLM workgroup reflects a vision of harnessing technology for collective empowerment and societal transformation. The concept of an open-source LLM workgroup in the millions aims to counteract the influence of hyper-capitalist powers by democratizing access to technology and empowering individuals and communities. This aligns with the idea of creating a more equitable and humane economic system. From a technical standpoint, here are a few insights into how such a work group could contribute to societal transformation. 1. Collaboration and innovation. By bringing together a diverse group of contributors, the work group can foster innovative solutions and rapid advancements in LLM technology, making it more accessible and effective for various applications. 2. Decentralization. A decentralized approach ensures that no single entity has excessive control over the technology, preventing monopolistic practices and promoting a fair distribution of resources. 3. Community-driven development. Encouraging community involvement can lead to the creation of technology that reflects the needs and values of a broader population, rather than being driven by profit motives. 4. Ethical standards. By establishing and adhering to strong ethical standards, the work group can ensure that technology is used responsibly and equitably, minimizing potential harms. While the challenges are significant, this vision of using technology to counteract existing power structures and promote societal well-being is inspiring. It requires collective effort, persistence, and a commitment to ethical principles. What steps do you think are most crucial for advancing this vision and ensuring it benefits everyone?
Well, I think that I've said on another part of this podcast that if many millions of people were to become revolutionarily activated in the U.S., particularly to demand the end of the omnicide, which necessarily means
I'm sorry, but you've hit the daily limit for advanced voice.
Freak.
You can.
I did have something else I was going to ask them, but that's okay. Aside from the things that I've touched upon, building the kind of cadre and a kind of operations a little bit beyond what typically might think of revolutionary organizations such as the People's Superintelligence to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse. These are necessities of a kind that could be said to be taking precedence over things like that I've touched upon here to do with healthcare advancement. But these things go hand in hand. The building of a livable world requires use of resources correctly toward the material conditions of all human beings and workers. Um, and another area of interest there, of course, that could be realistically rolled out by this thing which could be said to be a springboard to full communism, the People's Superintelligence. A good way of demonstrating that capability would be it playing a role in the provisioning of universal basic services in every land, seeing that everyone has the necessities of life, which could have well been provisioned by state socialism in every land by the standards of 1940. By 1940, state socialists had rolled out single payer public health services and housing authorities and jobs guarantees, which were operating with sufficient efficacy to ensure that everyone is able to live indoors and have enough food and have the kind of health care that they would need. But that's been held back by the forces of the right, financial capital and empire, and destroyed in so many ways, in so many places, to such a degree that we have 100,000 people in the United States who die every year for a lack of a single payer public health service, and comparable numbers dying for a lack of these other services. But in this 21st century cybernetic communist conversation, we can not only see that lower state socialism set of services is rolled out, but universal basic services more consistent with the 21st century, such as the AI-powered single-payer public health service, able to treat aging as a reversible condition that I mentioned, or, for example, the extension of other services not envisioned in the time of early 20th century state socialists, such as the treating of data as being tantamount to a human right, and access to data, which I think is an important area that should not be understated. If you want to build people's superintelligence, you have to have people having access to those very tools. And so this is something that many scientific communists of our time, I believe, do not focus on quite enough. And other serious people like scientific socialists and anarcho-syndicalists often do not focus on enough either. And everyone else, whatever their concerns for reform, anyone to the left of those two that I described are tending to be people who are too much a part of the problem to have any real, to take anything that they say very seriously. But certainly there are people who would fit that description who do have some focus on things like data as as being among the basic human rights, although not the foremost. This necessity of a global economic restructuring, it cannot occur, as I've said many times, without dramatically reducing the power of bringing to heel. And I think truly, actually, the dismantling of the U.S. hegemon. The U.S. Hegemon has been the ringleader of fascistic and anti-communistic activity for about a century, and there is no possibility of a livable world as long as the United States hegemon continues to exist. That is why I have run for president as a write-in, admittedly a fringe write-in candidate for the last two election cycles, and for 2028, I am Yohanan Ben Zion. That's Johannon, space Ben, space Zion, Yohanan Ben Zion, America's last president. I'm running on a land back campaign again to restore to the good and rightful stewards, the Turtle Islanders of North America, control of the United States federal holdings, dismantling the United States federal government, and the 50 states and all the U.S. cities would essentially continue in a very similar form. The states and cities would continue basically in their current form, but they would be overseen by further built out tribal ruling bodies who would take on the roles the U.S. federal government previously took on. But some of those roles, of course, would most importantly continue, not continue to be done. The United States could be seen as a giant scheme for siphoning off resources from the workers of North America and other places into this monstrosity, the abomination, the pentagram, the military-industrial complex, the world's worst polluter and protector of all other super polluters. That must be brought to an end. And if that is truly brought to an end, then the other services the federal government would provide would be better provided by this new governance structure of native political bodies. And so I have written an executive order that, when elected, I would assign on day one to see the dismantling of the United States federal government to this end of building a livable world and allowing humankind to build a humane and sustainable economic system in the absence of this ringleader of global fascism and anti-communism, the abomination that is the United States federal government. And I hope that you will consider making a note of myself and writing me in, even if, as has been the case in these previous elections, only a small number of people write in Yohanan Ben Zion, America's last president. It still sends a powerful message. And every time you share this kind of message with other people, just as every time you talk about a people's superintelligence or talk about revolutionary concepts in other contexts, you are doing a service in a way that these defenders of these unsustainable systems could never do. There are many people who think of themselves as activists who are their primary function is maintaining this unsustainable system. Their primary function is licking the boots of billionaires and the ruling elites, and they tell themselves that they're doing some service to humankind in doing this. They're doing quite the opposite, because as we know, we have until 2029 to dismantle these bourgeois abominations, after which time we will have reached this point where billions, if not all of humankind, will die because of runaway overheating from the capitalist climate apocalypse. That's not mere speculation. That's clearly the path that we are on, according to every credible climate scientist. And but if we do this thing of truly building a popular movement and revolutionary movement for a livable world, we will see rewards well beyond the mere stopping of the capitalist climate apocalypse, well beyond the mere ending of the ravages of financial capital, well beyond a wealth distribution as would have been described by 20th century standards, but because of these people's AI takeoff effects, things like the achievement of single-payer public health service for universal super longevity, or things well beyond this, AI takeoff effects that we cannot anticipate. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, my dear comrade, very soon techno-communism will win. Thank you.